I know many of you are looking forward to me ripping into Chapter 5 Season 1 and explaining how it doesn't really feel like Fortnite, but there's one issue. I don't think Chapter 5 is quite as bad as some people would have you believe.
Fortnite is officially ruining people's childhoods. Just when I thought they couldn't go any lower, they show us that they do not care about the children.
There are many elements of this season throughout the map and loot pool that are unique, and for the first time in seasons, Epic has managed to create content for the game that doesn't necessarily exist to simply meet a quota of having a brand new loot pool every season.
The grenade launcher might be a little powerful right now. It might be a little powerful, I'm not gonna lie.
However, these reviews aren't meant to be my personal diary, and even though there are many elements of this season that I found myself enjoying, that doesn't mean that its shit doesn't stink. This season by many has been dubbed as the Call of Duty clone, and many of the changes that support this statement have damaged this season's reputation, and will likely continue to damage the rest of Chapter 5. To better understand what changes I'm talking about, you need to know that I base these season reviews off of three main categories: the map, the loot pool, and overall content/quality of life changes. This season is quite messy in certain areas, and while yes, there are things that I found rather interesting about it, that doesn't make up for much of the horrendous nature that comes with it. Fortnite has never really been a game known for its gun mechanics. If you look at any other shooter, most people would agree that while yes, Fortnite definitely harbors a lot of unique gun mechanics by comparison, it's not exactly the most difficult game to aim in. I know that might make some people upset, but by far, Fortnite is a building game that features a shooting mechanic and not the other way around. Most weapons in the game are hit scan, and the only real trade-off to this, with most ARs and SMGs, is the bloom associated with them. However, these traits aren't a negative thing for the game, and have more or less been a defining staple for Fortnite. These details from the beginning gave Fortnite its own unique take on what a shooter could look like, while still implementing the building mechanics to still allow for that higher skill gap. So you can imagine many players' distaste for the new season when they reworked the loot pool to only feature projectile-based weapons. The main issue I have with projectile-based weapons is how unusable they are at range. Not being able to effectively get shots off at range with a normal weapon like an AR causes most people to not bother running them in their loadouts, which invokes two different types of playstyles that are rather negative for the game. The first and arguably more annoying, which is the sniper loadout, and the second being the item rotation loadout. The issue is item rotation allows people to prolong their deaths in fights with the get out of jail free card that comes with this type of utility. It ultimately doesn't make sense for Epic to continue to add items like this that prolong deaths in fights, as the game already has such a lengthy time to kill when compared to any other shooter.
He's 1 fucking HP, man! How is he doing that?
I'm not saying rotation shouldn't be in the game at all, but it should take the form of vehicle rotation rather than this dog shit. This season features shockwaves and the new grappler item that has 4 uses that can recharge over time. I just want to say that impulses are abhorrent.
No, alright. I know that sounds bad.
I know that statement likely caused anyone who religiously plays the pit to unsubscribe from this channel, but it genuinely needs to be said. Everyone looks at impulses as some kind of staple of the game because they're just so fun and bring up the vibes or whatever chicanery people will spout off about when talking about this item. The reality is, impulses are a far more brain-dead version of any other form of item rotation that we have seen, with the only disadvantage being the carrying capacity. The moment you get yourself into a bad situation, you can chuck one on the floor, doesn't really matter where, and you can be sure that it will launch you and likely your enemy into any direction that isn't where you are currently, without having to worry about obstacles like buildings or structures. And again, the only thing limiting to this absolute brain rot is the fact that they don't have recharging uses. However, despite the item rotation pollution that was already present during this season, Epic added not 1, not 2, but 4 new weapons that all doubled this item rotation with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles collab.
No!
Listen, I know their goal ultimately is to get people excited about the new collabs, but why does it have to be item rotation, let alone items at all? The one redeeming thing was that this collab lasted about only a few weeks, so they didn't stay until the end of the season, but still, really? Now there is one other major flaw with this season's loot pool, and it's the snipers. Honestly, the main issue I found with the new snipers this season is simply how common they are. Even if you aren't landing a medallion POI with a vault, the chances of you finding one are still incredibly high. These snipers are broken beyond all belief, even after the mid-season adjustments, but if they had little to no chance of spawning in the vault, and were overall significantly less common, it really wouldn't have bothered me nearly as much. But the problem is just about everyone who isn't running item rotation is just holding me at a distance with a sniper. Apart from from these issues, as I mentioned, there are parts of the loot pool that I do enjoy. While the shotguns this season need some adjustments, with the hammer pump shotgun needing a slight body shot damage buff and the auto shotgun needing a slightly slower fire rate, I really enjoyed having a set of reliable shotguns this season that for the most part weren't too unbalanced. I'm not saying they're perfect by any means. The mythic auto was rather broken, but it wasn't enough to really create that much of an issue this season. This is also the only season where a burst SMG feels stronger than the regular one, and I found this to be pretty interesting. The main thing that creates this difference is the presence of weapon mods. Weapon mods are something that the community has been asking for a very significant amount of time, and I actually think Epic handled it decently well. Apart from the hammer shotgun mods, which don't seem to do much of anything at all, each weapon mod allows for a buff to different types of playstyles that makes it worth spending gold on. My only real complaint is the accessibility of the mod benches. From what I've seen, the only places you can mod a weapon are in the medallion POIs, specifically in the vaults, and on the island, which is rather unfortunate because it's kind of limiting. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that Chapter 5 doesn't really feel like Fortnite, and I feel a lot of that has to do with the map, or more or less the aesthetic choice that the island makes with this chapter. To me, a lot of Fortnite's identity throughout most of its early chapters was the rather cartoonish aesthetic that came with the textures, models, and overall content for the game. However, it seems like as the chapters have progressed, Epic has slowly pushed away this initial aesthetic in favor of a more hyper-realistic style of design with their game. This chapter especially seems to be another step in that direction, with once again this focus on a more realistic style with their map. While on a surface level the changes to the textures, models, or even content around the map that is meant to take on a more realistic look doesn't really affect the gameplay, it does have some smaller issues that I've noticed. For whatever reason, this season has very muted colors around the map, and it plays into this larger problem of a loss of identity that the game has experienced over time. When I think of Fortnite maps, they're usually colorful with a multitude of biomes and terrain types that all offer different experiences when traversing them. In my opinion, it's the main reason people always refer to Chapter 3 Season 1 as the best map, simply because of how interesting it looks. But Chapter 5, it's just rather bleak and depressing, and even the snow biome it features is rather devoid of life. Now you might say I'm being pedantic, but these little problems add up, and over time it becomes a game that resembles COD in certain aspects when it comes to the visual clutter that is present in the game.
Like, this is more, it's so funny because the game almost feels more PUBG to me now than it does Fortnite.
Oh, riot shield! I'm a pussy that use riot shield!
I understand why they have moved from this choice in models and graphics, as it's far more advertiser friendly to have collaborations exist within a game that can graphically support them, but it comes at the cost of everything looking like a mesh of different styles and themes that at times can make it genuinely difficult to look at the game. This overall isn't a huge issue, but it definitely contributes to the identity issue that this season has. Apart from this, I really have no issues with the map this season. There are very few POIs on this map that I would consider bad, so I want to deconstruct some of the problems that some of the bad ones present. My least favorite named location on this map is by far Grand Glacier.
You surprise me to how shit you are.
It might be a hot take to dislike a medallion POI because of the density of loot that comes with them, but despite how much loot Grand Glacier has, it's rather unlandable. My main issue with this POI is in its layout. Grand Glacier consists of a small amount of loot surrounding one main building, with the building itself being extremely awkward to play in. This is because the entire center of the building is open from top to bottom, with the main loot consisting in rooms that border the vacuous center lobby. However, despite its rather awkward nature, most fights wouldn't end for me because of the inability to build, but rather the dispersion of the AIs. A location like Reckless Railways, another medallion POI, consists of multiple buildings and houses, with the larger house towards the bottom left corner of the POI containing the boss and the AIs. This to me works significantly better because it allows you to loot the surrounding areas before having to engage with the boss or the mini bots surrounding them. Grand Glacier, however, because it consists of one main building that is mostly open, doesn't provide this opportunity, and furthermore makes engaging in fights against real players very obnoxious given the deafeningly loud music that blares in the background while you're being berated by AIs that all give off the same sound effects as normal players. If this wasn't enough to cement this POI as a shit stain on the map, the mythic weapon associated with it is by far the worst out of any of the other 4 medallion POIs. At the end of the day, most locations like Rebel's Roost, Classy Courts, or even Ruin Reels that aren't necessarily that special are still far less irritating to land, even if on paper they don't look as great. I could go over what makes most of this map great, but it can mainly be summed up into a few different things. Permanent chest spawns create rather familiar looting paths, vaults at various non-medallion POIs, as well as a large number of underground locations around the map that can function on their own as genuine landing spots. You will notice this a lot with Chapter 5, where there are a multitude of non-named locations or underground areas that on a surface level look bland, but offer enough loot and shield to function on their own without working into a rotation. It's a level of detail that I really respect, and even smaller things like increased farming rates around the map just add a level of quality that isn't present in most seasons.
Someone cooked here.
I would define quality of life changes as small changes that add fluidity to existing mechanics that make the game more enjoyable for the majority of players. So when Epic Games introduced a new movement into the game, I would not define it as such.
Why did they just change the entire game? Why did the entire game get changed? Why did the entire game get changed? Why am I moving like a Minecraft character?
Wait, I need to put on auto run? What the fuck? How do I do that?
Dude, you can't even have good mechanics anymore with the running now. Dude, it is impossible to have good mechanics now. I'm not even trolling.
Now don't get me wrong, the movement now is fine. They made adjustments to it early into the season when much of the community was complaining about it. However, it's still worse in my opinion than the old movement, and I want to explain why. I'm not really concerned with the animations as they look overall more lifelike and less stilted than the old ones. However, I believe that the intention of this rework to the movement speeds was solely designed to slow down building. The thing is, Epic isn't completely stupid. They understand that directly nerfing the building mechanic would upset much of the community.
Why can't I build?
So instead they will often indirectly nerf it by lowering material counts, lowering farming rates, or adding spray weapons to the game, and other items that deal hefty amounts of damage to builds. This new movement accomplished this pretty well at the beginning of the season by making building feel awkward when you were moving. It is significantly better now, and I wouldn't consider it really much of an issue anymore. However, it does remove double movement, which I wasn't really a big fan of. The only real justification that I would hear for these garbage changes is that it makes movement more strategic because it's slowed down. Okay, whatever that's supposed to mean. With this new movement, they also added planks to walls to essentially allow you to wall climb. I'm not really sure why this was added, and I haven't seen it used much outside of a handful of times towards the beginning of the season. One of my biggest issues with this season when it came to the content were the medallions. The main issue is there really is no disadvantage to holding them. They take up no inventory space and constantly replenish your shield up to a certain amount depending upon how many you are holding. At least with something like the slurp cannon, which is another rather broken healable item that has infinite uses, it takes up 2 item slots, which makes you decide whether or not it's worth sacrificing the space. The AIs associated with the medallion POIs this season were also very annoying, as there was just way too many of them that would continually spawn in and all give off the same sound cues as a normal player. I understand they want to make the bosses difficult to kill given the reward. The problem is by the time you deal with the dozens of guards that constantly spawn in, and you finally kill the boss that has way too much health, you're often greeted with an instant death from some rat that was just waiting for you to do all the hard work for them. Chapter 5 Season 1 isn't necessarily a terrible season, but it does push much of its content in the direction of driving away the initial feel of the game. I talked about this in a prior video, but many of the changes this season just come off as very tone deaf, especially when you account for what made Season OG so popular. People have this common misconception that if Fortnite isn't trying to innovate the next new game mechanic or add completely and entirely new content, the game isn't good. Season OG proves that simplicity is oftentimes preferable, and while yes, there are many changes that I like this season, mainly in the map and weapon mods, there is still much about this season that further deviates the game from its original identity. I'm not saying Epic shouldn't play around with new ideas, but these changes just oftentimes make the game feel worse. As it stands, changes like a projectile-based weapon pool only exist not for some kind of trade-off value, but rather simply because it hasn't been done in the game before. With all this considered, I would give Chapter 5 Season 1 a solid 5.7 out of 10. Let me know down in the comments what you would rate Chapter 5 Season 1 out of 10. Anyways, thank you for watching and have a great day.